to today's very special Samhain event on my historical fiction books coming soon series. I'm here with Signe Pike, and this is her latest book. And it's so beautiful. I haven't actually gotten into this one yet because I'm halfway through this one. And do you know what? It's sort of touted as Outlander and Camelot all in one, which just, I couldn't resist that. And I know there's so many people on my page that love Outlander. A lot of us met through that. So because we are close to Halloween, Samhain, then this is perfect. And Signe said, let's do something cool that way. So thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. It's always fun to talk shop with another historical nut like myself.
We're a weird type, but we just love what we do. So I am going to read your bio, and then I'm going to read the synopsis, and then you can tell us what you're going to read after that.
Okay. Great.
All right. Signe Pike was born in Ithaca, New York, and graduated from Cornell University with her Bachelor of Science in Communication. She worked as an acquisitions editor at Random House and then Penguin before leaving to write her first book, Fairy Tale, One Woman's Search for Enchantment in a Modern World, which I looked at and it looks very fun. I'm looking forward to reading that one too. Pike has spent the past 10 years researching and writing about Celtic history, myth, folklore, and tradition. Her love of history, the great outdoors, early medieval and ancient archaeology, and her dedication to historical accuracy has made her social media feeds an informative delight to her readers. Signe teaches seminars and workshops internationally on writing and publishing, as well as on folklore and tradition. Her writing has been published by Salon, Charleston City Paper, Book Riot, and NPR.org. That's a lot. That's exciting.
You know, it took me a long time between writing Fairy Tale and writing The Lost Queen. So I had to do something. I did some essays and got some clips. So, you know, otherwise.
That's always good.
You know, gotta keep busy.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing like putting up your feet for a little while. It just doesn't happen.
No.
So I'm going to read the synopsis for the new book. So if you are watching this and you haven't read the first book, The Lost Queen, then I suggest you go out and get that very soon. You should put both of them on your Christmas list because I'm very addicted. My husband's like, are you ever going to go to sleep? Because I'm reading through it. So I recommend these for Christmas for sure. So this is the synopsis for The Forgotten Kingdom. And I hope I say the Celtic names right, Signe. I hope I wrote them big letters for me to try and read them right.
I think some of your readers might let us know if we mispronounce things, which would be great. So,
and everybody.
I heard in Nova Scotia they speak all the Gaelic. So
we do. We love the Gaelic up here. All right, The Forgotten Kingdom. From the author of The Lost Queen, hailed as Outlander meets Camelot, a rich, immersive novel in which a forgotten queen of 6th century Scotland claims her throne as war looms and her family is scattered to the winds. AD 573. Imprisoned in her chamber, Langoreth awaits news in torment. Her husband and son have ridden off to war against her brother Lieloken. She doesn't yet know that her young daughter, Anharad, who I haven't met in the first book yet, so I didn't even know that, spoiler, who was training with Lieloken to become a wisdom keeper, has been lost in the chaos. As one of the bloodiest battles of early medieval Scottish history abandons its survivors to the wilds of Scotland, Lieloken and his men must flee to exile in the mountains of the Lowlands, while 9-year-old Anharad must summon all Lieloken has taught her to follow her own destiny through the mysterious, mystical land of the Picts. In the aftermath of the battle, old political alliances unravel, opening the way for the ambitious adherents of the new religion, Christianity. Lieloken is half mad with battle sickness, and Langoreth must hide her allegiance to the old way to survive her marriage to the next Christian king of Strathclyde. Worse yet, the new king of the Angles is bent on expanding his kingdom at any cost. Now the exiled Lieloken, with the help of a young warrior named Arthur, may be the only man who can bring the warring factions together to defeat the encroaching Angles. But to do so, he must claim the role that will forever transform him. He must become the man known to history as Myrddin. I know where that's leading. That's very exciting. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's hear what you're going to read.
So I thought it would be really fun because Samhain is coming up, and a lot of people don't realize that Halloween still has so many traditions buried in it that are directly from the Celtic past. So things like bobbing for apples and those those are meant to be sort of a divining technique. Like you would say a wish and then you would bob for an apple. And if you could latch onto it, it meant your wish would come true. There were certain divinatory things you could do to try to figure out who you might marry on Halloween night. And those all come, the carving of gourds comes from the Celts. Dressing up in costumes comes from the Celts. It was meant to be able to frighten the wandering spirits away, because it's seen as a very thin night when the dead come back to visit the living. So Samhain is one of the most important festivals of the Celtic calendar. And it's still celebrated over there, which I'll talk about after this reading. So I thought it would be great. We are picking up from, this is the second book, The Forgotten Kingdom, and we're about a third of the way through. And hopefully people won't be too lost, because really this just follows the story of a historical 6th century queen, Langoreth, and her brother, who I believe was the historical figure who inspired the legend of Merlin. Because now scholars really think that there were actually historical figures underpinning the Arthurian legend. So that's all you really need to know. And Langoreth is with her 2 children, and she's going to go to the Samhain. It's Samhain night, and she's going to go to the festival where the Camelot will be there. And the Camelot is a goddess of death and blight and winter, but also creation. So, and that'll all be explained in here too. Okay, so this is chapter 14, Tutgal's Hall, Partick, the Kingdom of Strathclyde, which is where kind of the area surrounding modern day Glasgow and a little bit to the south. Samhain, 31st of October, AD 573. The eve of our new year dawned misty, the air rich with the loam of wet autumn leaves. Beyond the gate came the steady clomp of cattle as the cowkeeps returned with their lord's herds from their high summer steadings. A shiver traced my neck. Word had come that Tutgal and his army would soon return, and we were to prepare a hero's welcome. This eve of shades and lost loved ones, when things happened beyond our understanding, this night was my only hope to salvage what family I had left. I've trimmed it a little bit so we could. A few hours before sunset, the children and I dressed in our dark clothes and winter-lined cloaks, and I took my seat beside them in the horse-drawn cart. A shock of golden elm leaves clung stubbornly to their branches against a dreary late afternoon sky. Ayala had kohled my eyes and polished my torque. Beside me, Gladys wore her chestnut hair plaited and coiled, the bone comb that once belonged to my mother, tucked gracefully at the back. It looks so well on you, I said, touching it. And Cayenne, what a proper young lord you look. Cayenne brightened a little beneath my praise, and I gazed out the back of the cart as we left Tutgal's Hall behind. We were meant to be decorations in Partick on days such as this. At Cadzow, I kept holidays with our warriors and tenants as I pleased, seeing to the food and readying for the festivals. But here in Strathclyde's capital, I'd been warned that a balance must be struck. Tutgal permitted me and my children to attend the townspeople's festivities, so long as I kept a measure of distance. That my influence not grow too great was left unspoken. Strathclyde is a kingdom of 2 faiths now, he'd said. The king had made clear which faith he intended to win out. The tip of my nose was chill to the touch. Outside the cart, the road was lined with festival goers hurrying to the Samhain hill on foot, their children's faces disguised with woad and soot. Across the hill, the power towered in height. Suddenly, the drums kicked up, sounding like a heartbeat from within the burlap tent. When the last light faded, the veil would lift and the dark half of the year would be upon us. Cayenne came to slip his hand in mine, a gesture not often extended. I offered my other arm to Gladys and we made our way into the thick of the crowd. Elifid, the queen, looked up as we joined her on benches set aside for the Bonahithin, those of noble blood. She looked every bit Strathclyde's high queen this night, with her hair fair plaited and piled to reveal her slender neck, and her garnet brooch fastened at her breast. Snow-white ermine lined the hood of her cloak, setting off her winter gray eyes. Tell me again of the priestess from Isle Cailleach, Gladys said, taking my hand. Well, I bowed my head. Long ago, it was said they were weather workers, that through fasting and suffering and prayer, they could move fog with their hands and draw rain in dry weather. On their isle in the loch, they lived in utter seclusion. Neither man nor woman may trespass without invitation from the priestesses themselves. They leave their island only once, at Samhain, the turning of the year, to light the need fire from the torches they kindle on the Cailleach's own isle. More likely they kindle it from the inn down the lane, Cian said. Nay, Cian, it isn't so, I said. They keep it close in oil lamps as they travel over the rough gray waters, bringing it in their caravan to this very site. On the eve of Samhain, Britons snuffed out their hearths. Once the Cailleach lit the pyre, the people of Partick would touch their own tapers to it, carrying it home to relight their fires, so their hearth might blaze through the winter with the Cailleach's blessing. And is it true the priestesses must take turns playing the part of the Cailleach so they mightn't go mad? Gladys asked. I thought Elifid was not listening, but now she turned to Gladys with a frown. They play at nothing, she said. The Cailleach is winter and storm, death and blight. She destroys to create. She is not readily held in any woman's body, no matter how holy she may be. I understand, Gladys said, inclining her head. The beat of the bodhrans thundered to a crescendo, then stopped. We stood waiting for the processional of the Cailleach to begin. The ancestors appeared at the crest of the hill, young initiates in tunics and brats, their eerie white faces mirroring those of our ancestral dead. Their song was low and full of heartbreak, haunting. They're recalling their time among us, I said. Upon their heels came the harbingers of the dark time of death. They lurched along the processional, their naked chests painted black and their hungry eyes scouring the crowd. Cian edged closer on the bench as they stuck out their tongues and pulled frightening faces, making children cling to their mother's skirts. Never fear, I whispered. Now the keepers shall come. Their robes were the white of a swan's wing and glowed in the dim as they strode, banging their drums with purpose, sending death into the shadows to wait for its mistress. The crowd held its breath. And then she appeared. They appeared, the priestesses of Isle Cailleach. Their robes were not the white of other wisdom keepers, but a dark shade of blue. Their hair was hidden beneath the hoods of their cloaks, and their cold eyes looked feral, the way a wildcat's appear just before it strikes. The torchbearers guarded the need fire in their covered lamps. The horns sounded discordant. The priestesses parted to reveal the Cailleach. She did not walk. Rather, she seemed almost to float, like wind over water. Her face was painted the hue of a storm cloud, her hair plastered in a snow-white paste so that it clumped and tangled over her shoulders, a wild woman of the highest peaks. The Cailleach did not wear a cloak. Hers was a heavy dress of gray wool with a brat over top. The last sheath of the grain crop decked her headdress, a thin linen veil coming down, concealing her face. One could feel the might of her with blinded eyes, but unlike her consorts of winter, the Cailleach did not pay the crowd any notice. She was to be gazed upon. She did not gaze back. As the Cailleach neared the place where we stood, she stopped. The singing ceased. The faces of the priestesses flickered with surprise, and then the Cailleach turned her head. I could not make out her face beneath the veil, but the power of her gaze struck like an adder. Was she looking at me? I stood unable to move, so heavy was the weight of her stare. Then she lifted her hand to beckon, and my throat tightened. There could be no question. Me. The priestess nearest the Cailleach spoke. You, come, the Cailleach wishes to see you. The revelers parted in awe as I moved to do her bidding. I'd only ever seen the Kalyak on procession. Now I stood before her. In her veil, she was faceless. Woman or god? I could not quite say. Her storm-painted skin smelled of holy oils. When the Kalyak tilted her head to whisper in the ear of the priestess beside her, her voice was like the hiss of ice on a fire. You will light the need fire, the priestess said. A gasp came from the crowd. Me, light the need fire? The blaze was lit by the Kalyak. It had always been so. What if the winter should bring bitter snows and starvation? I would be to blame. I could only imagine this was some sort of trick, a test of my devotion. I am no wisdom keeper, nor am I a priestess. It is not my place. It is not my right, I said. But the Kalyak only waited with an air of expectation. The priestess came forward, offering her lamp. There was nothing to do but accept the flame. I stepped into the processional, following the Kalyak with the flame. As we reached the unlit pyre, the priestess turned. You must speak, she said. I was not trained to give the need fire blessing. Searching, I looked out over the field of faces. Beyond the crowd, the rise of a distant hill was a sleeping blue shadow in the coming night. There was a time, I began, when our need fire was lit on the mount of Bright Hill, when the old grove of oaks was tended by our keepers, the memories of our people nestled in their roots. Our hearths extinguished, our kingdom waiting in darkness. The fire lit on Bright Hill was a beacon of light, of hope and of blessings, of protection for our herds and our fields, our families and our flocks. Keepers from Strathclyde and beyond would wait for this signal to light their own blazes. Briton, Pict, or Scot, on Samhain, it matters not which kingdom we claim. On Samhain, the need fire unites us all in one purpose, honoring our ancestors and our gods. I searched the faces in the crowd. Now Bright Hill is a tomb for those of a new way. Now we mourn loved ones sent off to war, yet here we gather, here we remain. This night we shall see that the fire of our ancestors cannot be so readily extinguished. Let our fire blaze on. Let it carry our message to the hilltops of every land. The people of Strathclyde stand firm in our age-old tradition. The gods and goddesses of our land will yet reign. I saw the light on their faces, yet the air was full of waiting. The priestess brought me before the Kalyak, and I bowed my head to receive her blessing. I felt the graze of her fingers on my temples, and then, as they met my skin, a pulsing, like the clench of a heartbeat or the kick of an infant muffled by the depth of a mother's womb. It filled my ears with a rush as the crowd beyond fell away. For a moment, it seemed I stood on the top of a mountain, looking out far beyond the gray-green waters of a loch. I felt the thrum and churn of soil far beneath me, and the gathering wet clouds as wind raced over water. My body was stone. Wind and weather gathered at my head. My feet stretched their roots down through the mountain, connecting my tendrils across great distances until I became every mountain that rose in our land. Every cave and hollow was known to me then. I felt the curl of a bear as it bedded in a pile of winter leaves, the scratching of a goat's hooves upon salt-sprayed cliffs. I felt the whole of our vast island thrumming from its core at the bottom of the sea. And then she released me. I stood, head spinning, and senses overcome. Somehow I bent, uncovering the lamp, and touched the flame of the need fire to the pyre. The Kalyak lifted her arms, and for a moment it seemed as if she held all the great world between her two hands. The fire caught in a roar of orange flame. It was done.
Wow.
So that is a best as we can do, a recreation of what Samhain would have been like for the pre-Christian people living in 6th century Scotland.
That was beautiful. It's there's so much Celtic tradition in so many things, but it's been lost over time, you know, modernized and Christianized, but there's so much. I love hearing about it. How do you research all that? How do you get the ideas for these things? Where do they come from?
I think going over to Scotland has been so important to my research with these books, because as you know, when you're writing historical fiction, you know, you can still visit these sites. And what's amazing about Scotland is that those sites are still accessible and available. So to write this particular scene, I had heard about a festival in Edinburgh every year. They celebrate Beltane still, which is the Celtic festival of spring, and they celebrate Samhain. And so I think it was over 2 or 3 years ago, I went and I was able to be there on Samhain for the festival that they hold in the streets. And that was where it's put on by a wonderful theater company that's based out of Edinburgh. And the actors who do it are just phenomenal. But the description I put in this book of the Cailleach came from and was inspired by the Cailleach who marched along the Royal Mile. And her hair was, you know, pasted into these beautiful gray twisting dreads. And she was so regal. You could feel this power emanating from her. And she was just an actress, but my mother was with me and we were sold. The ancestors came, the spirits of winter were like taunting the crowd. And it really was, I think, as close as we can get to the types of festivals when you look at in Germany, some of the, like, is it what's the Walpurgis night or something? They still do this type of ceremony around Christmas time, I think. But yeah, it's really interesting. So I went and I saw it, and then I was able to go back and look through all of the mythology about the Cailleach and do a ton of reading about her stories, because although it's folklore, not fact, there's still a lot of stories you can find about, she's a giantess and she's the hag on top of the mountain. And then I found this really interesting bit that I want to share with you. So one of the sites I was going to in my books is Anharad, who's the daughter in the Forgotten Kingdom, ends up exploring the land of the Picts. And the Picts in Scotland during my time period lived north of the Firth of Forth. So that's north of Edinburgh and Stirling. That whole, all the way to Orkney, that was Pictland, that was their territory. And we're still trying to find out more about the Picts. They're very mysterious people. We don't know exactly what language they spoke, but they did build a lot of their houses, especially far up north in Orkney, out of stone. So we've got a lot of stone dwellings that are still there, the brachs, and then they carved a lot of stones. So they have left behind this beautiful artwork that we can study. So I was there in a really magnificent glen called Glen Lyon. It's one of the most remote glens, so very few people visit it any longer, but in Glen Lyon is one of the only places in the world where there is still a shrine to the Cailleach.
Wow, that's amazing.
And yes, it's a family of stones. It's in a little, what they call a shieling, which is usually a herder's cabin that's used in the summers, really rough, just really a lean-to, like we would say in the States or in Canada maybe. And so there's this little stone shieling and a family of ancient boulders that every Beltane are taken out of the shieling and put in front of it to guard the glen. And then at Samhain, they're put back into the shieling, into the little structure. And it's still done to this day.
Wow, that's so, see, they're so fascinating, all the and the reasons behind them all. It's fascinating to me. I love listening to you talk about this. And can I just say, when you were talking about when you were actually there, two things. One is, did you have a list of where you wanted to go? Like, did you have specific places? Yeah.
Yes.
You have so much information. You'd have to have a shopping list. That would have been exciting.
It's difficult because I only have a certain number of days in each place. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. You know, if I lived over there, it would be so much easier for me to write these books. But when I go, I have maybe 2 or 3 weeks to go to, you know, 6 or 7 or more different historical sites, and they're all across the country. So I do a lot of driving, which is beautiful. It's a really nice job to have. But you know that feeling when you go to Disney World and you can only go on just a few rides?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to really plan it out. And sometimes I don't get what I'm looking for. And if I can't find the information or if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't go in the book. So
Yeah.
but I never got to see this shrine of the Kalyak is so remote. I mean, you'd have to hike in for hours. There's nothing there. It's just a herd land basically for cattle and sheep. And it's also a really private site. It's maintained by the gamekeepers now and the landowners, I'm sure, who own that plot of land. And so, but I did get to go see Glen Lyon, and it's just beautiful. There's also a 2,000 plus year old yew tree, YEW,
Yeah.
that's at the head of the glen at Fortingall. And that's another site that's featured in my book because we think that was a site of pre-Christian worship as well.
Oh, wow. There's so much. The other thing I wanted to say was it was so obvious that you experienced that procession when the Kalia came by, and you said she was just an actress and stuff, but the way you write about it, it's like poetry. It was really beautiful the way you strung it together. I thought, oh, this could easily be listening to poetry. I loved it. So
Thank you.
it's true. And it also is, when I read it at night, it's so soothing. I mean, there's moments in it that when I'm reading it right now, I'm quite on edge for Langoreth. And I have to say, I'm very nervous for her, not happy with what's happening right now. I need her to just battle through it. But it's like, it's got really a lot of the tension and the adventure in it, but it's also so soothing. And that's all in the way that you've used your words. And it's so beautiful. So thank you for doing that.
You know, with the Lost Queen too, what's really important for readers to know is that the events that happen in the book, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but all of the major events, and especially the ones that are difficult to read because they pull your heartstrings, those events really happened during her lifetime. So she was alive and lived through some of the first religious warfare that her people had seen.
Wow.
Which was this ancient hill, Bright Hill, which I mentioned in the Forgotten Kingdom. She's hearkening back to that this hill, when she was a little girl, would have been a child. There was a hill in Glasgow that you can go to now that used to be a sacred place to the Druids. And there was a man who came to town who was a bit of a fundamentalist Christian, and he cut down the oak trees and buried the first Christian body on that hill, therefore ruining it for any sort of Druid worship, because they saw it then as sullied. It had been desecrated. And that actually happened as far as we know. And today you can still go visit it. That Christian man is Mungo. He is the patron saint of Glasgow. And the site is the necropolis, and it's now a huge tomb full of burials.
Oh, okay. And I was going to ask because that was a beautiful scene as well. And when you went there, did it feel different? Were you able to just relax and try to sense? I mean, it's thousands of years old, that site. So can you?
There's so many dead bodies in that hill. It's like just eerie. When you walk up it, it's very steep. And you can see it. And from the top of that hill, you can look out over the River Clyde. You can see great panoramic views of Glasgow. And it felt as I was walking up like a cemetery. But when I got to the top of the hill, there was this row, I think there are elm trees. There's some row of trees at the back. And that was where I felt some preservation of that ancient pre-Christian site. And you could see that for purposes of like Beltane and Samhain, we think were both fire festivals, and all the hearths were extinguished, as I talk about in the book, and blazes were lit. So you could imagine looking out at night and seeing these pyres burning all across as far as the eye could see. It's magical to reimagine that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that we get a chance to read about it through your interpretation and your senses. So I definitely want everyone to put this on their Christmas list, both books. And then we have to wait till 2023 for the next one. Isn't that funny? We're always getting asked that by readers, right? So when's the next book? This one just came out, so you're just gonna have to give me a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's, and I'm sure you feel the same way. It's both heartening and discouraging, because you spend 2 years or 6 years. The Lost Queen took me 6 years writing and researching it, and people say, I think the worst and best thing you can see as an author is, oh, I finished that book in a week and it just makes me want to cry.
Yes, I know.
You know, when is the next one coming? I finished that in a week and I've read The Forgotten Kingdom in 3 days and I'm just like, oh God.
When's the next? Come on, when's the next one? Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to know that they want more, but yeah, it's a lot of work. Writing on its own is a lot of work, but when you have to do the historical research, and yours is just so deep and so long ago, my kind of research is much more recent history, so it's way more accessible to read about. But what you've done with a deep dive into Celtic tradition, I think people are just gonna love it. And
I think it must be very satisfying for you, and I'm so envious that you can go to these historical sites and you can find diaries and you can, I mean, that must be so awesome. And it does make me wish I had set my book, you know, at least 1,000 years farther into the future.
Well, I have to admit that I am not a traveler. I don't actually have the ability to go out to all these places, but it's kind of funny because I was asked that. I wrote a long time ago, I wrote 3 Scottish books that are not in print anymore. And I was always saying, no, I don't get to go to Scotland and do all that research. And then my first Canadian historical fiction came out, Tides of Honor, which is about the Halifax explosion. And the question came up again, do you get to research on location? You get to do all these. And I was like, yes, I drove 20 minutes. I went to where it happened. So that's me traveling to it. But yeah, I'm doing all Canadian history. So it's all, I get to experience the whole country. I don't always get to get there, especially these days, but that's the intent, that's the plan. But at least I get to visit Scotland and the land of the Picts, and along with your book. So thank you very much for that. And I think I've said all I want to say, that everybody needs to go out and get these, because they're, and plus the covers, so pretty. Those are so pretty. That looks beautiful on any bookshelf. So.
And you know what, Genevieve and I were talking about how much we love maps, and I will say that making the maps for these books is really difficult, but here is, I can show you some of the map detailing. You've got all the kingdoms, so you don't have to worry about where things are, Strathclyde and all these new funny names. You can look at the map, and then all of the historical sites are on here with these hand-drawn ancient.
That's amazing. Did you do that?
This is done by a very talented fellow who did the map for the Lost Queen. He's a freelancer.
Beautiful work.
And I just send him, it's fun. Now we've worked together on 2 books, so I'll just send a note of where all the sites are as best as I can figure. And then he plots them on the map. And then I say, in this book, we have wild boar, crows, the Cailleach. Where is she? Oh, here she is. Here's the Cailleach right here. He drew her.
That's so neat.
Got a Pictish chieftain, female chieftain. So that was fun.
I found those very helpful too, because that was from the Lost Queen was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. It definitely helps because it's so foreign to us.
And pronunciation guide for the names. That's important. I was going to say, I actually, because I'm just about to start the 3rd book, writing the 3rd book, I've gone back and it's I'd like to hear what you have to say about this, but it's hard to sometimes read your own writing. Reading it is more difficult than having someone else read it or listening to it out loud. So I've been listening to the audiobooks, and the audiobooks are awesome for The Lost Queen. The Forgotten Kingdom has 3 different narrators, a male and 2 women. And their accents are beautiful. They're all either Irish or Scottish, and they're voice actors and do beautiful jobs. So that's kind of been fun. I've been loving it. You can get the audio in Canada, so it's really good.
I'm going to listen to that. And I know I love audiobooks, and my most recent one was male and female, and the Irish voice of the female narration was, it was so beautiful to listen to. And it was perfect because the character was Irish, so that worked out. But yeah, Audible is really neat, and I find them, I don't know if other people would think it's strange, but I find it very soothing to go for a long drive and listen to my books being read to me. So it's nice. Yeah. So well, I'm gonna have to look that up too. I've got the actual books, and now I need to listen to the audio. So thank you. Aww. So thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting with me, and congratulations on the success of the book. And I'll be waiting here, 2023.
Well, you never know. We might have the TV show might come out in the meantime. So maybe then people can cool their heels a bit. It's in development right now. So
Wait a second, I didn't read that anywhere. Let's hear about that.
I buried that lead, I think. Yeah.
You did.
It's been in the works for a couple of years, so it's been moving really slowly, but COVID happened, and but we're chugging along, and it's done by the team that does Big Little Lies. So it's a really amazing production company. Produce a lot of really great books to film projects.
Wow. And where's it going to be? Is it on like Netflix, or is it going to be?
We haven't shopped it with networks yet. We definitely are hoping for a TV series rather than a film, because there's just so much to unpack in these books.
Yes, definitely.
So
that's so exciting.
Yeah, maybe they'll beat me to the punch, and that'll keep people busy for a while. That would be amazing. So I can write. Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, well, keep me in touch. Keep me informed with that one, and I'll post it on my pages too, because I'm looking forward to that. So thank you very much again. And I have to get back to reading now. So
and your own writing. And I want the Scottish books back. You need to put those out.
They were out for a while. Now I'm moving on to when I moved out here to Halifax, I lived in Toronto and Calgary, so other areas of the country, and I moved to Halifax, and I looked around Nova Scotia, and I saw so much history that I never really thought about before. And I read a lot of historical fiction that's set in Europe or England or in the States, but not here. And so this is my fascination.
There's a lot of great history there. Yes, in Nova Scotia especially.
I'm really, really proud of what I'm learning and what I'm being able to share. So it's a lot of people are learning about our country this way. I slept through history class as a kid, so this is my way of learning. So it works out.
It's a good way to earn back your history karma, for sure.
That's right. That's right. It's coming back in spades. So happy Samhain.
Thank you. Happy Samhain to everybody. I'm so glad. And now everybody can know a little bit more about what they're going to be celebrating this weekend, and think about your ancestors coming back to visit you on this thin night. Make sure everything's okay, and bless your home for the coming winter.
I may have to create a kayak to go outside my house.
Yeah, or you can put beautiful offerings by pictures of your loved ones who are departed.
Oh, all right. This is adding to my decorations more than my candle and my.
Yes. So happy Samhain to everyone. Yes.
Thank you again, and I will talk to you later. Bye.